we have with Steve Kerr, Tiffany Loftin of the NAACP, and Ben McBride of the Bring the Heat movement in this place. So please stay tuned. It's going to be amazing. Go to massforthepeople.org. Help us order PPE for folks or donate at livefreeusa.org. We just got in 330,000 more masks today. So the work is still going. We're instead going to re-air a conversation that we had on how to use your voice. Tune in this Thursday at the same time. Me and Kamal Bell are going 2-on-1 with the great senator from the state of California, Kamala Harris, to talk about the policing work that needs to be done. God bless. Talk to you. Enjoy the conversation. Peace. Yo, here we are. Here we are, live at Levi's. Live at Levi's in a moment of history where we are really going to be depending on one another to get us through it. Yep, this is me, Pastor Mike. I am the National Director of the Live Free campaign of the Faith in Action Network. And we have been working for at least a dozen or so years to implement and scale up strategies that end gun violence in urban communities, end the mass incarceration of Black and brown young people all across this country, and increase the ability for folks to vote in the elections. And so we are super excited to be rocking with Levi's. They have been some of our biggest homies in the corporate partner space. And so this is a super dope opportunity for us to go down the rabbit hole around how to use your voice. And I want you to know that all of us have a voice. All of us have a way to speak into this moment and to help us figure out how to do it, particularly where you are situated. We got a super amazing group of friends, homies, comrades that we've been rocking with for some time. They're going to come in and help us figure it out. Now, if you're on Instagram, we want you to make sure that you are sharing this with folks. Make sure you share the link to this whole conversation. If you're on Facebook, hit that share button. If you're on Twitter, retweet. Let's get the whole world up in this joint and let's have a super dope conversation about how we use our voice in these most troubling times. So first up, I'm so excited because this is one of the baddest sisters on the planet. She is super dope, super amazing. Live at Levi's. I'm in the Bay. She's in Washington, D.C. She's coming into the room. The great, amazing, stupendous, magnanimous Sister Tiffany Loftin. Come on in the room, girl. Woo, look at that.
I feel like I'm at a rally already. Appreciate you, Pastor. What's up? What's up? What's up? Good to see you. I'm glad you look good. I'm glad you're doing safe. I feel hype now.
Yeah, it's hype, it's hype, it's hype. Well, you know, we about to jump into this thing because it is an important moment for us all across the country, particularly we who have been organizing and doing the work of justice for quite some time. It seems like the whole world has at least stood up or at least, you know, sat up in their bed and looking around like, man, what's been going on around here? Tell us a little bit about how you've been involved. This is not, you're not new to this, as they say, right? You have been involved in this work of activism for a while. So please just introduce yourself and let us know how long you've been in the work and what drives you.
Sure. A lot drives me. I've been in this work. Let me start here. I'm originally from Los Angeles, California, born and raised. I know I live in DC. I've been here for almost a decade, but I am a California girl through and through. And I
That's
went to the
why I knew
University
I
of
liked you.
California. West Coast is the best coast. And I went to UC Santa Cruz. And when I got to UC Santa Cruz, after applying to a bunch of schools and having a bunch of burdens, trying to get into college because of access and affordability and my parents' resources to get me in, lack of my parents' resources to get me in, I finally got into a college. And then when I got there, the Regents rose our tuition 17% just in the first year.
Mm.
And then in the span of 4 years, they raised it almost 100%. So I try to fight hard to get into school. I get into school, they raise my tuition. So now I'm trying to figure out how to stay in school. But when I was a third year in college running for student body president during Black History Month campaigning for the election, one of my peers hung a noose on campus. So I
Mm.
fight hard to get into school. I get into school, they raise the tuition, and then I'm in school and somebody hangs a noose at school. And so I just felt like, being a young person in California, of all places, where it's sunny and I thought everybody was happy and we loved each other no matter what our race was. Um, I had to really reconcile what it meant to be a young Black woman in 2011 running for student body president at a predominantly white university, and then organize my community on campus to fight for three things: Black housing on campus, ethnic studies on
Mm,
campus, and shared governance. We won two of the
mm.
three of the things of the campaign. And ever since then, it's been my work and mission to support young Black people, young people of color, and make sure that folks have the tools and the skill set necessary to fight for what they need in their community. Now I work at the NAACP at the National Director of Youth in College, doing the exact same thing for incredible, dope, inspiring young Black people across the country.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's Tiffany. I mean, you are indeed all over the place, like flying from city to city.
Literally.
Well, pre-corona, that is city to city, college to college, helping people get activated. And I think it's really important on a day like today, where all across the country people are acknowledging this is Gun Violence Awareness Day, and folks are wearing orange. And by the way, our mutual comrade Erica Ford, we got her props because she's the originator of the Wear Orange whole thing to raise awareness to gun violence.
At
So
Life
big shout
Camp
out
in
to
New York.
Life Camp in New York. Big shout out to Erica Ford. Donate to Erica Ford. Go to Life Camp and give her
Yep.
props on her day. Amen. Send her a little tithe, a
Yep.
little offering. I don't know. Just
Yeah.
do something and bless her. But you know the impact of gun violence that indeed has been ravaging our communities. And I remember you were, as you were starting, I think the job at the NAACP, you were in some marches, and this whole thing went viral. Your voice of speaking out about these kinds of issues. Just talk about the impact of gun violence in our communities, and dare I say, all forms of violence. As Coretta Scott King says, that violence, political violence, policy violence, et cetera, the violence of the poor. Just talk about
Economic
what
violence,
inspired you to
educational
get involved
violence.
in gun
That's right.
violence. Mm-hmm.
So again, my responsibility as the National Director for Youth in College is to make sure that I center folks who are directly affected by the issues to lead and fight for solutions for their problems, right? And what that means is 2 years ago when I started my job, the very next day, remember the Stoneman Douglas shooting happened on in February 2018, and the next day of my job was the Stoneman Douglas shooting. It then became my responsibility to make sure that Black voices, right, Pastor McBride,
Mm.
because we talk about
Yeah.
solutions for gun violence and school violence, and everybody, the media was focusing on white folks, but Black folks have had um, organizing movements around gun violence and ending gun violence for a very long time. And it is
That's right.
it is wrong for any solutions to talk about gun violence and exclude or silence the Black community. So in a matter
Mm.
of 2 weeks, I organized, partnering with MTV and Everytown Gun Safety, 12 buses from across the country, including partnering and working with Eric Ford. And
Yeah,
we brought a
yeah.
thousand young Black people to Washington, D.C. to be a part of the first March for Our Lives that took place on Pennsylvania Avenue. Now, here's why you bring up that moment, because that was actually my first viral moment, which I don't understand. Anyway, so my first viral moment. But more importantly, it was an opportunity for me to expose young people to a rally or a march or a protest for their first time. A lot of those young
Mm.
people that I bought, who were between the ages of 10 to 25, they had said to me, Tiffany, it's my first time in DC. It's my first time at a protest and a rally. And that is the reminder to all of us that even right now, through this weekend of what we're seeing, for some people, not us, not you and me, but for some people, in this visceral moment, it is their time to join the movement for the very first time. And
Wow.
I want people to find
Wow.
political homes so that they can strengthen their experience, their knowledge, their language, their vocabulary, their tools, their leadership, etc., and work with the community so that we don't have to fight against violence on our own, right? My
Mm.
job at the
That's
NAACP when I did that was to make sure that these young Black people were in Pennsylvania Avenue, understood what it was like to speak truth to power and speak their own stories and their own truth, where otherwise they would have been silenced, and then go back to their communities with a network of people across the country who are going to help them stop violence in their communities. So every year, we've obviously participated in Wear Orange, and our students have had protests and rallies and worn orange and done stories across the country. But that's not where it stops. And you and I and Erica, we all know that. We know that it starts with the awareness, but it doesn't stop
mm.
until people start voting, until we have real
Mm.
reform, until we have conversations
Mm.
with our elected officials who can keep our communities safe, and until we are able to invest in our own communities to protect public schools and public services
Yes.
for our people. That's the work of the
Yes.
NAACP.
Yeah, and let's stay on this for just a minute around institutions, because sometimes our current kind of culture can be a bit anti-institutional. Like, we're not, we're
Yes,
not
it
very
can.
willing to commit to institutions. We want to be kind of like autonomous on our own. I don't want to be loyal to nobody except for the
We don't
brands
want
on my
structure,
on my
right?
body. Yeah, right. So you have allowed the institution of the oldest, as they used to say when I was active in the association, the biggest, the baddest, the oldest. What's the description? I
The
can't
biggest,
remember
the
all of the
baddest, the
words.
oldest, the boldest, the most cursed, all of it.
And so my institutional home is the Black church, and other folks have institutional homes, and millennials have started to raise up their own institutions where they can find a home. Some of our listeners at Levi's or all across the country, just talk a little bit about the importance of doing it together and not by yourself. The importance of building institutions or participating institutions that can defeat the systems, right? That are literally
Right.
attempting to erase the individuals. Talk about institutional organizing and why that's a part of this kind of response to this.
So let's start here. We Community is one of the values that I hold when I organize. And in order to have
Mm,
community when you're organizing, you have to belong to a space of like minded people who want to see some of the same solutions that you want to see, or who have similar experiences dealing with violence or dealing with whatever systems of oppression we're referencing, to fight against those things together. Let me give you a quick example. Recently I've been getting a lot of emails from people who say, Tiffany, I want to get involved, I want to lead, I feel triggered and I feel moved to do something deeper than just to donate. What can I do? And so I'll give them advice. You join a political organization. Where do you live? Are you a part of a community of people who are fighting for stuff because you can't do it by yourself? One of these emails that I got, though, Pastor Michael McBride, let me tell you something. This person emailed me and they said, hey, I want to put on a protest. I said, great, what city do you live in? They told me what city they lived in, and I said, well, so what do you want to put the protest on for? This is the email exchange. He said, well, I want to put on a national protest in Washington, D.C. in honor of the March on Washington. Now, the person's watching, I'm not going to tell you what your name is because I don't want to put you on blast, but I'm going to tell you a story because this is real and relevant. The person said, I want to put on a protest in Washington, D.C. Now, I said, that's amazing. They said, I want to do it in honor of the anniversary for the March on Washington when Dr. King spoke. Now, you and I were both at the 50th anniversary that happened not too long ago, 6 years ago,
yes,
I believe, in
yes,
DC.
yes,
So
yes.
I had to remind them. I said to them, well, we just had a march. Uh, and if North Carolina's infamous leader, Pastor Reverend, he's putting on the Poor People's Campaign March in remembrance
Mm-hmm.
and legacy of Dr. King's work, and it's happening in June 2020. So I told the person, I think you should join that march and be a part of that work and that effort because it's a rally happening in June. They wrote me back and they said, I don't want to be a part of that. I want to put on my own. I said, well, which organization are you with? They said, I'm by myself, but I want you to help me put it on. I said, well, if I've told you that there's a
Mm.
march already happening, if I've asked you to be a part of a community or organization and you tell me no to both of those things because you want to put on a march by yourself, then that just makes me feel like, it might not be true, but I've been doing this for 12 years. That just makes me
Yeah.
feel like you're making this about you and your ego and not necessarily a part of the collective
Yes.
work that we need to do, right? You don't put on
Yes.
rallies and host the event for money to fundraise money for victims of gun violence at the Howard Theater, Pastor McBride, just because you want to put on the rally. You don't jump on the
Right.
Levi's because you want to be on Instagram. We do this work
Right.
in community in relationship to each other because it's going to
Yes.
take all of us to win. And so I want folks to hear that because that means that you have to choose for yourself which organization best supports your values, your belief, is with the people and the community that you feel like you love and you want to support and be a part of. And once you are able to identify that, it ain't got to be the NAACP, it should be, but it ain't got
Mm-hmm.
to be. And if it's not, whatever the organization is, I don't care if it's a faith ministry. I'm a part of the social justice ministry at my church. Whatever
That's
ministry or
right.
whatever group it is, we need people organizing against these
Yes.
systems, not a
Yes.
person organizing against the systems. And that's my message to the folks.
Woo, the great Tiffany Loftin, y'all. I'm telling you, this girl bad.
Nah.
She bad. She bad. Now we got about 5 more minutes left with you, and I need to ask you two questions that I want you
Okay.
to respond to. Today is Breonna Taylor's birthday, the late Breonna
27th birthday.
Taylor, who was literally killed sleeping in her bed by some police officers that busted through her door. On a no-knock warrant, which are some of the most violent, terrifying experiences you'll ever experience. And we can't escape all of the protesting, the uprisings that are happening in this country. What would you say to folks who are trying to live faithfully in this moment? And I know the NAACP has a "We Are Done Dying" campaign that is trying to respond to all of these different things. So just say a quick word about Breonna Taylor, intersectionality, and we are done dying, and just encourage some folks. How can they show up? And then I want to ask you a quick question about some healing too. But say something about that.
So today would have been her 27th birthday. Um, so we want to honor the family in this moment, because I know that all of us are moved by what's happening across the country, but my job is to center, again, the people who are directly impacted. So I am uplifting her family today as they remember their loved one who would have been celebrating a birthday. And I just had my birthday not too long ago, so I'm resonating with this. I want folks to make sure that we do not erase women from the fight of Black Lives Matter. The reason why we even created Say Her Name is because the narrative in the media was focused on all of the unarmed Black men who have been getting killed, right? Say Her Name is the challenge, is the interruption to say you can say Black Lives Matter, you can list all of the men who have been killed, but do not forget about the women who have also lost their lives at the hands of police brutality, and also our trans brothers and sisters, because
Mm-hmm.
we saw two trans folks who are just killed in the last month, also, one of them by police brutality. And so the NAACP with our We Are Done Dying campaign is calling for a few things. I'm not going to go through all of them because you can find them on our Instagram page, because I want people to do their own research. But two things that we're calling for right now is one, for the United Nations to step in and for them to deem the mistreatment of Black people by the police as a human violation, human rights violation. That's the first thing we're asking the UN to step in and do. The second thing that we're asking for is sweeping police reform. And there's not one way to fix that, right? Every city has different rules. Every police station operates differently with different uses of force. And so our list is comprehensive around not having chokeholds and police brutality, et cetera. But let me tell you in 3 seconds what a dope campaign that we've been doing on the youth and college level. We've been traveling across the country with our members, talking to them about the relationship between the police department and the schools. And we just saw
Mm.
yesterday the superintendent of the Portland Public Schools just tweeted out that he was going to break the relationship between the school system and the police to keep the kids safe
Wow.
until further
Wow.
evaluation. University of Minneapolis just did the same thing where
Yes.
they cut ties with the police. We saw Albany State University, University of Colorado Boulder. I have Fisk University and FAMU and FSU. They've all taken stances to write petitions to evaluate the relationship that students sometimes pay for with their own student fees, mind you,
Mm.
between the school and the police. And so there's multiple ways to get involved. Follow us at the NAACP.org website or on Instagram and Twitter, NAACP, for more information about how to get involved. And you can send me a DM for the toolkit about how to break relationships between the schools and the police.
Ooh, Tiffany Loftin, she is a veteran of this work, and I love her so much. She's like, her heart is
I
gold.
love
She's
you
for the
too.
people. She loves young people. She loves organizing. It is an art. She's committed herself to learning the art of organizing, and because of that, your last words to us, I want you to encourage organizers, even some of our Levi's comrades who are just kind of getting their feet wet in this whole effort. How do you take care of yourself? How do you experience healing and joy and a way to just be sustained in these tough times? Because the work is hard. This is not us going to Club Med, hanging out. I mean, we are literally fighting forces that are centuries of collusion and ancestral relationships. Talk a little bit on your way out. Self care. How do you
Yeah.
find healing and joy for the work you do?
I have had to be very easy with myself, because we are in the middle of a global pandemic, and that is not normal. So the job that I have and the responsibility that I own in my existence on this planet, being an organizer, I have to be easier with myself in this moment when I get emotional, or when things are really hard to watch, or when discussions are really hard to have, or when interviews are really challenging for me, because I've been on a lot of interviews lately. I have to be easy with myself by reminding myself we are in the middle of a global crisis, a pandemic, both in racism and in health. And that is not a good place for anybody to be in. So, first, being easy with yourself. Second of all, I literally just got off the phone with my therapist about an hour ago. I'm still committed to making sure that my mental health is well, and that is whole, and that I can be happy. I have been reading my books. I've been reading a lot since I've been on quarantine. I've been cooking a lot. I go running 12 miles a week just to get everything released and off of me, because I'm a runner. But I want people to be easy with themselves. I want us to remember that we are not alone, that every single person is going through the same pandemic and crisis that we are. I want people to remember that they're not alone in watching the news and on Instagram, that it's okay to reach out and ask for help. I had something traumatizing happen to me at my home when the police came walking down my street with tear gas canisters at 2 o'clock in the morning and woke me up out of my sleep. And I called my friend. I said, I need you right now. And they came and picked me up so that I didn't have to be by myself. It is okay to ask for help in this moment. And it is okay to also check out. I've been watching Pirates of the Caribbean. I've been playing Michael Jackson. I've been turning all
Yeah.
my devices off for hours. It is okay to do that, to be easy with yourself, because this is a marathon, not a sprint. And so I want people to take care of themselves first so that we can win together.
All right, y'all. Y'all find Tiffany D. Loftin on Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, Boomerang. No, is there a Boomerang? There ain't no Boomerang. What? Just find her everywhere. Follow this sister. She is the bomb diggity. I love you so much. Give my best to everybody
I
at the
love you too.
association. Stay in the fight, and
Absolutely.
we'll see you in the streets, as we say. All
Thank
right.
you.
God
Thank you
bless
for
you,
your
Tiffany
leadership. Love you,
Loftin.
brother.
Everybody,
God bless you
amazing,
too.
amazing, 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 amazing. I'm so glad to have had her hanging out with us. We're getting ready to bring on our next guest. But before we do, listen, I want you, please, 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 take this moment out to just put on the chat, put in the comments, put on Facebook, put on Twitter, one way you're going to facilitate or prioritize your healing, one way you're going to use your voice to ensure that you can do the work in this moment of amplifying the issues related to gun violence, police violence, interpersonal violence, violence against women, violence against our trans and queer and loved ones, violence against immigrants. On a day when we are talking about gun violence awareness, let us say very clearly, make some commitments how we are going to raise the awareness around violence and be a part of the solution by using your voice. You got a voice. Don't allow your voice to not be used. And now we have one of the living legends, one of the greatest of all time. He is an NBA head coach of the three-time Golden State Warriors. He's also multiple, I think, three-time champion with the Chicago Bulls, and he is here hanging out with us. The great Steve Kerr, the coach of the Golden State Warriors, is in the room. My homie, my friend. What's up, Steve?
Pastor Mike, how are you?
Man, I'm good, and glad to be hanging out with you one more time. I see you got on your cool orange shirt, your wear orange shirt.
Yeah, today's Wear Orange Day. For the ending gun violence awareness. For those who don't know the story, young woman in Chicago named Hadia Pendleton was shot and killed at the age of 15, and her friends at her funeral all wore orange. And it was orange is the color that hunters wear in in the woods, so that people
Mm-hmm.
recognize, oh, we can't shoot at that, right? And so
Right.
it's a symbolic thing. But today, I think the next 3 days, June 5th through 7th, nationwide, there's a Wear Orange campaign, and so I'm trying to do my part in that campaign. And I want to say one thing before we move on. Tiffany, wow, wow, what a
Serious,
superstar!
serious.
She is a
Oh
superstar. That was
man, and
impressive.
She's on that list we making together that we gonna blast out a
Yes.
little later. But yeah,
Yeah. When
she's in that. She's in.
she said she ran for president at UC Santa Cruz, I started thinking maybe there's another office she could run for
Come
before
on,
too
come
long.
on. All right, all
Let's
right.
go.
Yeah, y'all tweet that out. Steve Kerr has
Let's go.
officially been the first endorser for Tiffany D. Loftin for president of these United States. Tiffany, you got a pretty
I'm
good
in.
endorsement already. You didn't even have to do no work.
I'm in. I'm in.
All right. Well, we are indeed so happy to have you, and you are one of the most outspoken on many issues. Someone who's using your platform, using your voice to help amplify, and you just did it so powerfully. Just explaining the meaning behind why you wear the orange shirt in harmony and partnership on this great few days of raising awareness around gun violence. But most people may or may not know that you actually have a personal story related to gun violence, that you're not just speaking about this from an altruistic point of view. You might just share a little bit about how this issue really has penetrated your own life experience and how that drives you to engage in social action, to use your voice and your platform.
Yeah, so my father was killed in Beirut, Lebanon. He was the president of the American University in Beirut, and in 1984 he was killed by two gunmen in an act of terrorism. And so, obviously, my family and I went through horrific pain, and so I have a connection to every person who, every family member who goes through that kind of loss. And so I've just felt really strongly over the years to try to lend my voice to various efforts, whether it's the Wear Orange campaign or the Sandy Hook Promise, Giffords, Brady. I try to do as much as I can to help those causes. And then I ran into you a few months back, maybe 6 months back, and we did an event together in Oakland that just blew me away. And I was so impressed by the work you were doing. And now we have a great partnership. And obviously all these things are tied together, right? It's just violence. It's people who are being maligned and wronged, and how can we connect together to try to create a more just society and a more humane world? And that's what this is all about.
Yeah, yeah, and it is indeed the case that this moment is literally bringing people into a national, dare I say, international conversation about issues related to racism and our complicity or our resistance to it. In our conversations, we've been talking a lot about these kind of things, and it's just so fascinating to have folks like you and Popovich, who just very seemed like more easily talks about white privilege and the way in which discrimination, bias, white supremacy just permeates the culture of this country in ways that may be seen or unseen. Can you just talk a little bit about what white privilege is? Because sometimes messengers do matter, and we did publicize broadly that we're gonna talk about white privilege today. And I was like, you know what? Let's have Steve Kerr come and talk to us
Yeah.
about white privilege. But
Yeah.
just educate us, coach us to a championship on this issue.
There you go. Well, first of all, Greg Popovich is one of my mentors. I played for him for 4 years, and one of the things I love about him is that he's not afraid to speak out on anything. We were always very engaged in social conversation, political conversation when I played in San Antonio for him, and he's been an inspiration for me. And he's given me the courage, frankly, to speak publicly and not to be afraid to speak what's on my mind. And he's helped me realize how important it is, especially for a white person, in our position of prominence to speak about the truth, to speak truth to power. And white privilege, I think, is sometimes a misunderstood phrase. And what I've found when I speak with my white friends is sometimes there'll be a heartfelt thought like, you know what, I didn't grow up privileged. Like, I didn't have money growing up. I had to work hard for everything. And that's where the message is skewed and lost. And I try to
Right.
explain, we're not talking about privilege. We're talking about white privilege. It's totally different thing, right? Privilege is, mommy buys you a car at 16 and you got all
Right.
the, you got all the toys and everything you want and your silver spoon in your mouth. That's not what white privilege is. White privilege is being able to get that loan when you barely have any money in the bank and you're trying to buy your first home. That's white privilege.
White
And
privilege.
people, yeah, and people don't understand. White people don't understand that they have it, and that in itself, that I want to say ignorance, but I'm trying not to offend people because I feel like white privilege is
Well,
something that people don't realize exists.
Let me say it. Ignorance. Okay, go ahead. So you didn't offend nobody.
Okay,
Go ahead.
you got it. You're right. You're right. But so what I try to explain is no, it's not privilege. What it is something that you just take for granted and you don't even realize is there. My kids went to a public elementary school that was funded by taxpayer dollars, and we had counselors and we had all the best teachers and we had everything because we lived in a wealthy area, right? The same public school in a poor area is also funded by property taxes, and guess what? The property taxes bring in way less money in the poor Black and brown areas, and so the schools aren't funded as well. So the white families don't even realize, in a lot of cases, they don't even realize what's happening and why it's happening. And I think what's so key, Pastor Mike, is for, especially at this time where people are all starting to wake up, it's important for white parents to understand this issue and explain it to their kids and explain how systemic racism manifests itself over time, explain the connection between 400 years of oppression and why that matters now, and how it affects society and the African American community. And if you share all this stuff, because no kid grows up racist. Nobody's born racist, And so the more educated the kids are, the more enlightened they are, and the more likely they are to actually want to do something about this system.
Yeah. I mean, it's so great to talk about how do you start younger, because people are taught this, and it's harder to unteach something than to just teach them correctly the first time, which is one of the great reasons why we engage in such organizing and try to have these awareness days. I am noticing, and we've been talking a little bit about this as well, that more people are now curious about how to use their platform. One of your Bay Area colleagues, Coach Kyle Shanahan, did an interview yesterday that just really, said it's time for white people to stop denying that this exists. It's a problem. What would you just say to white people who are still finding it hard to speak out? Because we need, I think, our folks to be willing to speak out past the crisis, right? Like past the headlines, just in their everyday lives. Corporate leaders, influencers, CEOs, pastors, parents. What would you say to folks to just encourage them to use your voice, speak out more? What do they need to do to keep cultivating that? Because you are a learner, and we've been talking a lot about some of this process. What would you say to folks so they can keep using your voice to speak out?
Well, I would say that changing a system is the analogy of turning a cruise ship. You don't just turn it around. It's got to change. It's got to turn very slowly but it takes a lot of effort, and eventually you get that thing turned around. It's going to, so this kind of thing is going to require everybody's participation. And if you're white and you're in a place of prominence, especially CEOs of corporations, people who have a platform, we can help. Everybody can help turn that cruise ship. It's not like there's one captain who can just say, you know what, this is the way we got to do it. So I think that's important for people to understand that this is really a group effort. And then I would say, if you feel nervous about speaking out, watch the George Floyd video and imagine that's your child, and then remember that George Floyd was not committing any kind of violent crime. He was using a $20 bill that was forged. It was a something that could have been handled very easily, and yet there was a 9-minute murder committed in front of the world, and this is the country that we're living in. This is our country, and so nobody else is going to change it unless we all decide this is going to change. And if you picture your child in that position, I'll bet you'd be willing to stand up and say, no, I'm going to fight for this. And George Floyd was a human being just like you and me, and a father and a brother and a son, and it's just humiliating that this can happen in our country. And here we are. We like to think of ourselves as this great country, but we got a lot of, and we are in many ways a great country, but there's this huge stain that we have to confront and acknowledge and try to address, so that we can allow everybody in this country to live freely, to use a phrase from a wise man I once knew.
The great Coach Steve Kerr, everybody. I'm telling you, it's been a joy walking with you, and me, you, W. Kamau Bell. We started this thing called Mass for the People, and we've been literally on text messages and conversations, just talking and dreaming and thinking and plotting and planning. And I just want to appreciate you, man, because you really have been leaning in a way that I hadn't imagined, and I'm not trying to blow smoke up your butt or whatnot. It's just I think a really cool thing, a cool journey to walk together. And so just any final things you want to say to folks, particularly as relates to how would folks kind of lean in and get involved and start learning more. I mean, maybe just concretely, what are you planning to do in the short or long term?
Yeah.
Just as an example, to keep encouraging people to use your voice in this moment.
Well, just so people understand our relationship, the Warriors and our team is connected to Live Free, and we're going to continue to grow this relationship. And I'm really excited about where we're heading in the future, because I think we can really benefit each other. And right now, the NBA Coaches Association is in the midst of putting together a program. I'm on the committee. And in large part, it's inspired by the work that you have done in Oakland, connecting the community, connecting the police and gang members and social workers and Mayor Schaaf and Buffy Wilkes and everybody who can sort of be a part of the solution. You've brought all these people together. And so the NBA Coaches Association is reaching out to a local grassroots program in all 30 NBA cities. We're really committed to boots on the ground, to let's connect with the people like yourself, Pastor Mike, who know what they're doing and are in the fight. And we are committed to supporting the fight and offering our voices and our resources however we can. And that's what I would suggest to anybody out there. Speak to your kids, educate yourself, and register to vote. Ask 10 people that you know to register to vote, and make sure you get out there in November. And one last thing that I know I want to work on that you can help me with, and we'll talk about it going forward. We have to get more voting centers in areas of color, because I've never waited more than 5 minutes in my life to cast a ballot. And every year at the
Wow.
election, I look at I look at the long lines in African American communities, and I think, you know what? If that happened in my neighborhood, if we had to wait more than 10 minutes, people would throw a complete fit. You know, that's again another example of
Yeah.
white privilege. But
Right.
let's all work together and let's keep going. And I like the way this is headed. And thank you so much for giving me some time today to speak, and more importantly, for all the work you're doing. You are the man.
Nah, man. I just serve the man and well the woman or I just yeah that yes. And we all do it together. The great coach of the Golden State Warriors, Steve Kerr. We love you, man, and we'll see you. We'll see you in the streets somewhere near you. Everybody
Can't wait.
appreciate Coach Steve Kerr. Follow him. He just got his own Instagram page. He just got his own Instagram page. So follow him at the Steve Kerr so he can feel good about himself. That's a quote. The great Steve Kerr. Stay tuned. We're going to be continuing to partner with him. Thank you for coming on by. Listen, y'all, we are almost done. We got one more guest we're getting ready to bring in. Listen, I hope that you are taking notes because using your voice requires that you have to be a learner. You have to learn. You have to read in order to learn. You have to read. You have to learn in order to lead. All right. And so it's really, really important for you to be taking notes in these conversations so you can use your voice. Coach Kerr gave you some great stuff. He said, talk to your kids. Some of you need to come get your kids out these protests because they tearing up everything. Some of our white loved ones, right? Just rage and rage and rage. Come get your kids, right? So, but also teach your kids. You also need to do your own work. Do your own work, your own internal work. We always say that the first revolution is always an internal revolution. So it's really, really important for you to do that most important work internally. And then, like you said, give to organizations, partner with directly impacted folks, follow the leadership of Black folks and brown folks and immigrant folks and Muslim folks that know more about these situations than you do. Formerly incarcerated folks. Shout out to the great Desmond Meade out in Florida who helped to restore the vote to 1.3 million people. These are wonderful, wonderful ways for you to get involved, to use your platform, use your voice, so we can keep shaking up the world. All right. Finally, I'm bringing in my brother. Literally, I call him my big little brother because he's about half a foot taller than me. Ben McBride, and he also has the voice that I've always wanted. I have all the treble, and he has all the great Ben McBride, the director of PICO, California, and the architect of Bring the Heat. Say what's up to the people, Ben.
Hey, what's up? It's good to see. Oh, well, I can't see you, but y'all can see me. But it's good to be in the space with everybody after a long week of all of us doing the work that we're doing to try to make sure that all of our communities and every human being can live free. It's good to be in the space.
Yeah, man. Now, show everybody that shirt you got on because your coat is obstructing it. Open it up like Superman so we can bring the heat. Now that is literally the motto of this moment. We got to bring the heat on this particular time and day where we are literally trying to raise the awareness around gun violence in our communities all across the country. The many ways that gun violence visits our community, suicides, neighbor to neighbor or interpersonal violence, domestic and intimate partner violence. We have the mass shootings, we have accidental shootings, all these kinds of ways that gun violence impacts our communities. But you have been one of the most important leaders, along with Reverend Demita and Dr. George Cummings and Reagan Harmon and David Muhammad and Laurent Armstrong and on and on and on and on. Folks, Zach Carey, that have been in Oakland helping to contribute to a historic reduction in gun violence. Talk a little bit about the work of Live Free, or we called it, I think, Oakland Ceasefire or Lifelines to Healing. It's had so many iterations. Talk about that successful work we've done in Oakland over the last 5 years to have a reduction of violence, gun-related shootings and homicides by 50%, I believe.
Yeah.
Tell us more
Yeah.
about that.
Well, I think it very much so is kind of what Coach was kind of talking about in terms of his own analysis of learning about our work. I think the success that happened in Oakland of reducing gun-related shootings and homicides over the course of 5 years happened because you had people across difference from different sectors who chose to put the pain of our communities over the just unique identity of their own organizations and work together to bring about a shared outcome that none of us were going to be able to get on our own. We have to recognize that Oakland had averaged 100 homicides a year for 40 years. And when we
Wow.
began to actually take our own interests and set them to the side and begin to hold collective interests as our main priority, ensuring that the men, the young brothers who were at the highest risk to either commit an act of violence or be a victim of violence, when we centered them and made them our utmost priority and cause, whether it was from community leaders or the city services, the mayor's office, law enforcement partners, and probation and other services, when we focused all of our attention on being responsive to the young men's challenges and issues, we saw an incredible reduction in homicides. The first year, we reduced homicides by 30%, and we've continued back and forth to have some heights and some valleys. But over the course of 5 years, we've been able to successfully reduce homicides by nearly 50%. I just want us to hold and appreciate what that means. That means that there is likely 150 to 200 people who would have died if it had not been for this
Mm.
collective work. And so it just continues to reinforce for, I think, me and others that we don't need to wait for any other people to come into our community to resolve the issues that we're struggling with. It is about us working together, putting people over our own selfish interests and keeping the people who are most at risk, keeping them as the focus, listening to them and learning from them. We'll be able to create peace, not just in our city, but in cities across the country.
Yeah, man. I mean, it it is indeed the case that sometimes we overthink the ways in which we create peace and make peace. You know, we both come up in the church, and so we love the words of Jesus that said, "Blessed are the peacemakers, right? For they shall be called the children, the people, the loved ones of God." And so, talk a little bit about these peacemaking strategies. Like, there's several
Yeah,
iterations of what these
yeah,
kinds of efforts do, particularly when we talk about neighbor to neighbor violence or gun violence in
yeah.
urban communities. Talk a little bit about why it's important to use different language, number one, and then how do those strategies break down? Hospitals, custom notifications, call ins. Just give us a quick dive
Yeah.
down that rabbit hole.
Yeah, Dr. John Powell from UC Berkeley, Other and Belonging Institute, talks about that universal strategies don't lead to universal goals. You actually need targeted strategies in order to get to universal goals. And we found that is that in order to actually create peace, it meant we would have to use targeted strategies to get to the universal goal of peace for everyone. And so, what that meant for us is in our ceasefire work, which is what we called it in Oakland initially, it was the work of a communication strategy. And so instead of
Mm,
actually offering incarceration or the threat of incarceration as a deterrent, what we would do is we would bring together the individuals who had been identified as those who are at the highest risk to either be shot or shoot someone. We would bring them into conversation with each other and with adults and community members who love them. We would talk to them and listen around what were the challenges that were causing them to be at risk. And then we would create targeted strategies for them to avoid their challenges and choose better outcomes. We would do it on a regular basis. And so every 2 to 3 months, we would fill a room with 20 to 25 young brothers who were involved in the violence, because a lot of us don't know it's actually less than 0.5% of any city's
mm.
population that is committing over 60% of the gun violence. So we're talking about a very small number of people that actually contribute to the mass number of homicides and gun related shootings that are happening. We used a communication strategy with them, talking with them, and then bringing services. For some people, it was jobs. And so we would build relationships with business owners who would keep some entry level jobs available at their business so that we would be able to onboard young brothers who wanted to make that change. Some people didn't need that. Some people needed some reentry or rehabilitation programs. And so we build relationships with the programs to ensure that we could get them into that. Some of them needed life coaches. And so the city of Oakland, we organized and passed a public city measure to make money, take taxpayer money, and create life coaches so that we would have the mentors available to walk our young men through different changes. And we got involved with retraining the police department so that they could bring a different orientation to the young brothers in our city instead of bringing one of over policing and an aggressive one, we started doing training to help law enforcement understand the contextual orientation for the relationship between community and police so that they could behave differently. And then there were other targeted strategies that we used. We had some people who would meet folks in the hospital after people had been shot. And instead of them getting involved in revenge, case managers would talk to them and help them find a different way to process their grief and then figure out what steps needed to be made so that person could both recover from their injury and make some different choices going out. And even apart from some of those targeted strategies, we had a lot of organizations that were moving volunteers into neighborhoods, unpaid people who would walk neighborhoods doing something we called night walks. You can go on YouTube and look up something called Oakland Night Walks, and you'll see where neighbors of all racial backgrounds would walk the neighborhoods on Friday during the day and Friday at night, and sometimes on Saturdays. We would have neighbors who would do something. Pastor Zach Carey had something called Save, where they would do what was called a stand-in, and they would go to the intersections where people had been shot, and they would stand and raise awareness and call for peace. So it's all of this work of people meeting people in the hospitals and building relationships with people at the table and getting neighbors to walk the neighborhood and then doing organizing work to make different decisions with our public resources. These kinds of targeted strategies all work together to save lives. And at the end of the day, what excites us most is that we were able to not just save lives, but we were able to do so without having to hire more police officers. We were able to do so in a way that actually leveraged more money to save the lives of Black and brown young people. And just to tell you a really, really quick story, I remember sitting in one of the conversations, and to my left was a young Black brother who had just been shot recently, pulled up his shirt and showed me the gun wound that was still healing. And to my right was a young Latino brother. And as I was sitting there, and he had been involved in gun violence, and I was talking with them about how they wanted to change. And I asked the young Latino brother, I said, why is it only at this moment that you're making the decision to change? And he said, no one's ever asked me to change. And no one has ever committed to me to give me the relationship and the support to change. And he said, if you would be willing to actually be there for me, then I will be able to have the support to make a different decision. What that showed us is that, some people say nothing stops a bullet like a job. That's partly true. What actually stops a bullet is another human being in relationship with the people who are at the highest risk to commit acts of violence or be victims of them. If we'll get in relationship to them, that's what we've learned through these targeted strategies, that human beings' relationship and love is actually what creates the conditions for peace.
Yes, yes, yes. Ben McBride, everybody. I'm telling you, this brother is, he's my brother, but brother too. He is a practitioner of this work, and he's also been helping us to rethink a little bit about how we imagine the linkage between our issues related to gun violence between community members and then the violence of the state. Some folks uncouple these two. They think, Black lives will matter when they start mattering to other Black people. You hear people say this kind of ridiculous kind of comment all the time. But we have, over the years, made sure we did not uncouple neighbor-to-neighbor violence in Black neighborhoods and police violence that is now at the front of our mind. Can you just talk a little bit about why it's important to keep those things together and how we can reimagine in this Gun Violence Awareness Month a way to talk about violence differently, a way to talk about public safety differently? Just talk a little bit about that. We got a few more moments
Yeah.
with you.
Yeah, we spend way too much money on policing, and some of that comes because of our deep suspicion and mistrust for one another and our disconnection with one another as relatives. What we found is that policing is not the answer to actually create peace. It is relationships and it is intentional investment. What we found is that it only takes a $40,000 a year job and a $20,000 investment of services. If you take $60,000 and you multiply that times the amount of people who are at the highest risk to commit an act of violence or be a victim of violence in a city, there you have what I like to call the cost for peace. Now, what we found, the Center for Disease Control has told us that it costs $1 million every time there is a homicide in our city. And so in 2012, when we first started, we cut 39 fewer homicides that year, which meant that the city and the larger apparatus saved $39 million. what would it look like if we took a fraction of that, or even all of it, or most of it, and reinvested it and took $60,000 and multiplied it times the 200 to 300 individuals who were likely at a risk to shoot someone or be shot? That would just be probably 10 to 15 million dollars, and that would be our cost of peace. We have for too long been comfortable with having and investing in a culture of death instead of investing in a culture of life. We need to stop investing in a culture of people dying. Let's start investing in a culture of people living. And so we found if you invest in the cost for peace, it makes policing less brutal, it makes policing less necessary, and then we can do the work of undoing the racist system that is policing by undoing the racial challenges around hiring and equipment and accountability and training. We call that HEAT, HEAT, hiring, equipment, accountability, and training. This is the framework we use. We say we're going to bring the heat, which means we are going to bring transformation to the public safety system in America until we create one that everyone can belong to. So while we work on the cost for peace, we will equally work on bringing the heat. So those two things together will help us all live free from all gun violence, whether it be community violence or whether it be police violence. And then we want to continue to do the work to make sure that we are reducing gun violence that shows up domestically, that shows suicide, and that shows up through robberies and accidental violence. If we can relieve the group-related gun violence and the police violence, that is going to create the conditions for us to respond to all of these other kinds of important violences in ways that will continue to save lives.
We are wrapping our time up with the great Ben McBride, the director of PICO, California, and one of our very most important practitioners that have been leading all across this country and even in this state to help us think through how we create more safe communities. Tell folks how to be in touch with you, to be in touch with your work, and what do you got coming up in the near future?
Absolutely. So go ahead and follow us on social media. Very active there. You'll be able to kind of keep tabs on a lot of different things that are showing up and ways that you can get involved. So on Instagram, you can follow me at Ben J. McBride on Instagram. And then on Facebook, there's both a public page. If you go to Ben McBride, you'll find me there. On Twitter, my Twitter handle is at Ben McBride. So go ahead and connect with me on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, Ben J. McBride, and we'll find a way to connect. We want you to join this movement to transform the public safety system into one that saves the lives of our Black relatives, our brown relatives, and all of our relatives across difference who find themselves challenged. Go to bringtheheat.info. It's bringtheheat.info, and you can sign up for this movement to transform the public safety system. We need everyone of every orientation to join this large movement of people. We're protesting in the streets, but we've also got to take our energy into our civic institutions so that we can bring long-term change.
Man, I love it. I love it. Well, I'll see you later on because we got to, do a little bit more, mischief together. That good kind of mischief. Touch your neighbor, right? And so I'm so glad to have my brother, Ben McBride, here with us on Use Your Voice live at Levi's. We're wrapping up and we're running out of time, so we're going to have to get ready to sign off. But I just want everyone, please take everything you've heard and put it into practice. We have the opportunity right now, right in this moment, to make history. History is being made. It is not yet written what the final result or outcome will be. I want to encourage you to find institutions, organizations in your city that are doing this great work. I can list off a whole bunch of them just off the top of my head. Life Camp Incorporated, Cities United, Advanced Peace, Community Justice Action Fund, our loved ones who are with the Advancement Project, Color of Change, of course, our Faith in Action, our national network, Live Free. Find you an organization that is doing this work. Don't start from scratch. Join in, bring your best gifts, and let's make peace. This is Pastor Mike. I'm signing off live from Levi's for Use Your Voice. Use it, don't lose it, people. Let's make the change and be the change we want to be. Till the next time, all power to the people. Yeah.